I'm going to show you two of the houses that Dr. King stayed at when he was here. Now, if you'd like more information on the civil rights, we have the Accord Freedom Trail. There's a cell phone audio tour with it. Self-guided, you get the brochure at the Visitor Center. It's a project sponsored by Northrop Grumman out there at the airport, our largest employer in town. Dr. King stayed at the Gray House and at the White House coming up next to it. Now, if you look up to the right, you'll see what those Freedom Trail markers look like. You'll see them all over the city and not on the island. And then the other plaque talking about when Dr. King stayed here. Dr. Haley's dental office is now a civil rights museum. Last year he was in town at 84 years old to receive our highest award, the La Florida Award, for recognizing his work in civil rights. He lost his dental practice. He was beaten pretty severely by the Klan, who knew he was a dentist. They made sure and broke his hands. He was in a hospital for 2 weeks. This is Bridge Street that we're on. The reason it's called Bridge Street is the next corner up here. Going across, Cordova Street used to be Maria Sanchez Creek, and there was a bridge went right across here. And across the way begins the southern boundary of the old walled city. And then, like I say, we're turning on what used to be Maria Sanchez Creek, and off the right was the Rosario line of the walled city. This was the southwest corner of the Spanish defense line. The property coming up on the right is called Emancipation Park. This is where in December of 1862 the Emancipation Proclamation was read, which freed the slaves in the state of Florida. And we're going alongside the Rosario line, the old walled city up to the right. We're outside that wall right now in the 19th century, and then we're going to go on the other side of the wall, up to the right, into the colonial days. Up at the corner, we'll go past the Casa Monica Hotel. It was built by Franklin Smith. He opened his hotel in 1888. That was the year Flagler opened the Ponce de Leon. And Flagler's hotel was filled to capacity. The Casa Monica was about empty with only 3 guests in it. Mr. Smith went out of business, and 4 months later, Flagler bought it. He renamed it the Cordova. And Flagler now owned the Cordova, the Alcazar, the Ponce de Leon hotels, and the Florida East Coast Railroad Company. Casa Monica today has its original name back, and it's named for Monica, the name of St. Augustine's mother. Now, the 1880s was still horses and buggies. It was in 1886 that in Germany, Carl Benz invented the first automobile. But it wasn't until after the turn of the century that Henry Ford came out with the Model A or Model T, and everybody could have a car at that point. Henry Flagler, most of his life, was in the horse and buggy era. Up on the left is the Government House Museum. Now, this is where the governor lived. He faced the Plaza de la Constitución. Constitution Plaza refers to the Spanish Constitution of 1812. It's when Spain adopted a new constitutional government. And 2 years later, in 1814, Ferdinand VII was reinstated as the King of Spain. He had promised he'd uphold the Constitution, but when he took the throne, the first thing he did was to declare the Constitution null and void. He told everyone to take their monuments down. St. Augustine said they didn't get the memo. They left their monument up. It's on the left, the only original monument that still stands today in the world to the Spanish Constitution of 1812. Got another monument coming up on the left up here. This is a memorial to 46 sons of this city who died in the Civil War. Got a third monument coming up here on the left. It honors the foot soldiers of the Civil Rights Movement. And behind it, our next stop, that's the old slave market. Now, when the Spanish were here, what was at the location was a guard shack and a watchtower. It was turned into the market when the British came. It's our stop for the Government House Museum, south end of St. George Street, and the Cathedral Basilica. Alrighty, folks. Got a statue on the right, Juan Ponce de Leon. It's an exact copy of a statue in San Juan, Puerto Rico, where he's buried. The first governor of Puerto Rico until the King of Spain removed him from his governorship and replaced him with Christopher Columbus's son. Well, then Juan Ponce was out of a job. He headed north looking for the fabled island of Bimini and ran by accident, discovering Florida. Someone found a pretty leaf over here. Ah. There's a basilica up here on the right. In 1887, it was hit with a fire, and Henry Flagler paid for its restoration. Now, when the ships came in from Spain, they brought the situato, which was the soldiers' pay and food supplies. Well, they also brought news from home, and the townspeople would gather in the square. The governor would stand on the balcony up here. Ahead of us, he'd read the news that the ships brought in. Might not be another ship for another 2 or 3 years. And in September, less than a year away, the King and Queen of Spain will be standing on that balcony. Wow, guy, nice parking job there, guy. Up ahead of us is Trinity Episcopal Parish. They're the oldest non-Catholic parish in the state. They were the Church of England and changed their name in the American Revolution. There's a window in there by Louis Tiffany. It's called the Disappearing Angel, and there are some folks that say you can see an angel in the glass if you look just right at the right time of day. Just past it, the Wells Fargo Bank. It's the old Woolworths store. And the doors are still in place. In 1963, there was a whites-only lunch counter there. The bank has that lunch counter on display. And during the week, you can walk in there and see it. You can see a picture of it on the wall. In 1963, 4 black school students, they ranged between 14 and 16 years old, sat down at that counter and asked to be served a hamburger and a Coca-Cola. They got thrown in jail for it. Their parents, because they were underage, asked to sign a paper saying they no longer allow their kids to protest in that way. When they refused to sign, those kids spent 6 months in jail, and it was a national outcry that got their freedom. They were known as the St. Augustine Four. They still live in the community. And see that Freedom Trail marker on the wall? Tells what took place there in 1963. You know, Philadelphia likes to say they got the oldest residential street in the United States, but we're going to turn down Avilés, which is 100 years older than Philadelphia. And this is what's unique to the red trains. The trolleys don't fit down here. And it's known as the Street of the Royal Hospital. The Spanish Military Hospital is here on the left-hand side. Now, north of the plaza was all restricted zone around the fort. Down here was the public area. So it's like going to Europe on a budget. Restaurants, cafes. On the right is the Sir Kirby Smith House. It used to be a private home, and now it's the archives and a research library for the city's records. We're going to stop here at the Jimenez Facial House Museum. Bed and breakfast dating back to 1798. You know, we had a famous guest here. His name was John James Audubon. And Audubon painted the fort in some of his bird paintings. Now, the way he painted his birds is he'd go out and shoot them and then pin them on a board back in his studio. So next time you see a picture of Audubon's birds, they were pictures of dead birds. The wall coming up on the right is older than our country. It's been here since the late 1600s. Pirates came and knocked it down, and so did the English when they burned our city. So it's been rebuilt a few times. The Father Miguel